back to Solo Adventures! My name is Livy, and I'm here for the long-anticipated video where I rank every single solo PnP game entered in this year's BGG Solitaire PnP contest from my least to most favorite. So I'm going to just explain a couple of things before we get underway. So as you might already know, I have built, played, tested, and reviewed every single game in this year's contest so far, and I have made a video about every single game as well. I'm going to be providing links to each of the entries in the description down below. As far as I know, every game in the contest is still free to access right now, although I don't know if it will be in the future. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of points. This video isn't going to show any gameplay, as I've already showed the gameplay in each of the respective videos. And since there are 56 games that I'm going to have to cover in this ranking, I'm not going to be spending too much time going into crazy in-depth on every one, because otherwise this video might be hours and hours long. But of course, if you're interested in hearing my more detailed thoughts, you can feel free to check out every related video. So in the process of testing these games, I have built everyone in the highest quality that I can manage. I wanted to make sure that the gameplay would not be hindered by a low quality build and that every game would be able to shine to its fullest. So every game was made in complete full color, and I made each one as if I already knew that I wanted to permanently add it to my collection. Since this is my ranking video, I just want to emphasize that these are just my opinions. Yours might differ, and in fact my opinions are also oftentimes quite different from those of what the community voted. So please don't take my ranking too seriously. I definitely have some styles of game that I'm more inclined to like than others, so of course I might be biased. But in any case, here is my personal ranking. So as unfortunate as this is, as with any ranking video, there's going to have to be something that is at the very bottom of the list. And in this case, my number 56 is Math Dungeon. This game ranked so low for me just because I found the mechanics to be quite cumbersome, and I simply did not enjoy the guess and check math equations. It wasn't particularly fun for me. Math Dungeon is the only game that I actually found painful to play, and so it had to be my number 56. Coming in at number 55 is Terraphobia. Terraphobia is a little solo card game, and I just didn't have too much fun with this game. I've played it many times, and I have found that it is nearly impossible to lose. The designer has cleared up some of the rules that I confused maybe a little bit in my review video, but ultimately, even playing with everything 100% according to what the designer wanted, I just didn't really find this game particularly engaging, not really involving very much skill and mostly luck, and even in that case I won almost 100% of the time. However, Terraphobia does have a really cute and creepy art style, and I think its art design is adorable. Coming in at number 54, we have Against COVID-19. Now, Against COVID-19 is a game that I had a really hard time learning because the rulebook was very confusingly written, and I simply found the game to be just too difficult to even comprehend how you could win this game. In addition, I didn't find that the decisions were particularly interesting, and in general, I think this game just needs a lot of work in order to be fun. All that aside, I wasn't really a huge fan of playing a game that was COVID-19 themed, seeing as how I play board games to escape reality, but that is neither here nor there, and your mileage might vary with that. My number 53 is Go Alone. And placing this game so low on my list really hurts me because when I first saw this game, I just really wanted to love it. Its art style is just so beautiful and atmospheric, creepy, imaginative. The flavor text is really evocative, and I was just really disappointed that the gameplay wasn't very well balanced and doesn't generally lend itself to very interesting choices or really enough strategy to make this game fun for me. As I said, however, the art is lovely, and I think it's worth taking a look at just to see it. Even though this game didn't rank particularly high in the rest of the contest, it was voted the third best original artwork for a game, which I think is pretty impressive. Number 52 is Zombie-Filled Scourers. I found this game to be quite repetitive and very based on luck. In addition, it was not very thematic. It's called Zombie-Filled Scourers, but it doesn't really have anything to do with zombies whatsoever. And in general, I just found it too easy and not particularly engaging over the long run. That said, it does have a picture of an adorable corgi on the cover of the rulebook, and I would have loved it if this game had been made about him. Number 51 for me is Between the Sticks. Now, this is a football team management sort of game that I don't necessarily think is particularly bad for a game. I think that for the right person that this game could be really good even, balancing all of the pros and cons and attempting to create the best possible mix of skills for your football team. But for me personally, I found it to be kind of a tedious math problem, and I didn't really enjoy playing it. Number 50 is The Obscure. Now, this game was another one that I really wanted to love just based on the art style. It's got this really lovely, vibrant, fluorescent 1980s aesthetic, and it's just a joy to look at. I really wanted to like this game, but I found that it was quite unbalanced and very swingy. It requires simply too much luck. As I said, the artwork is great, and the community agreed as well. This game was rated the 6th best artwork. Number 49 is Delenda Roma. Now, I actually had an okay time with Delenda Roma. I found it fun and puzzly in a lot of ways. The reason why it's so far down this list is that it is simply too difficult. Now, I really do like difficulty in my solo games. I would really prefer that a game be too hard than too easy, but in the case of Delenda Roma, I don't really see any possible way to win. I like the theme, I like the whole idea of having kind of a Roman invasion war game sort of thing, but I do think that this game needs some rebalancing. Number 48 on my list is Cillas Revenge. Now, Cillas Revenge, I think, could actually be a really good board game, but I don't think it was really made for the solo player in mind. As a multiplayer family sort of game, this game could actually be really fun and engaging for multiple age brackets to enjoy together, but for the solo player, it feels just a bit too random and a little too shallow for the amount of time that has to go into setting up this game. Number 47 is a special one, and that is Gotta Get Out of This Space. And this game is unusual because it actually doesn't have a rulebook. It has an entire website, and the website is actually really well executed. The whole thing feels extremely professional and it looks really good. Unfortunately, Gotta Get Out of This Space is a solo game that isn't really a pure solo experience. This is a game that relies on one person printing out and making the components and playing the game once, and then packaging it up and sending it to a friend who will pick up the story as it was and continue on. For me, just the solo player, being able to play it only once and not having a lot of deep decisions to make, and the game relying so heavily on making your own cards and kind of coming up with your own characters, I just don't think that this is going to be really engaging for other gamers who are like me that don't have other friends to play with. So as a testament to just how good a lot of the games in this contest actually are, my number 46 is a game that I actually like quite a lot, and this is Lifeguard Search and Rescue. It was ranked rather low on the list just because it's got a very short playtime, it's not particularly deep, and the game difficulty is very strongly based on the luck of the first roll of the dice. But I do find it very fun and arcadey, and it's a good little palate cleanser between longer games. So if you would like a simple little roll and write, I think you could do far worse than Lifeguard Surf and Rescue. Number 45, The Lands Beyond, was also a game that I found very charming. Despite its extremely simple aesthetic, I really got a feeling of a fairy tale sort of adventure. It reminded me of like The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings or some of those other fantasy stories that involve a main character setting out on a grand journey with a bunch of friends to help them along the way. I really like the narrative that emerges from the gameplay and the choices that you can make between either staying out late and adventuring or getting some sleep and refreshing your skills. The problem with the Lands Beyond is that the party members do not have very deep application, and I do find the game to be a bit too easy overall. I do think that with a little bit of work, I could really find myself having fun with this game though. Coming in at number 44 is Route Finder Transcontinental. And this is a game where you're playing a pilot in the early 1900s and you're attempting to fly your plane from one side of the Earth to the other. It's got a really cool setup where you get to choose your patrons and you also get to decide how you build your airplane. I also really like the story that just kind of emerges over time. My only problem with the game is it doesn't seem like the player has a lot of control over what actually happens in the game, and I think that it doesn't have that much replay value once you've beaten it once or twice. Coming in at number 43, we have Stalemate. And Stalemate is a little Palm Island kind of game that is based around World War I. Now, this is a perfectly competent little Palm Island style game. In addition to me just kind of not liking the war theme very much, I think that maybe the mechanics could have been changed up just a little bit more to really differentiate this from Palm Island, because I think they feel a little bit too similar to me. Number 42 is Burgeon, a game that I think is actually really wonderful. The only thing that really holds it back is the fiddliness. This game requires lots and lots of tokens and tiles, and it requires a lot of manipulating these little pieces on a small board, and it's not particularly easy to keep everything in order. I think that this game really belongs more on maybe a smartphone app or something like that. Gameplay-wise, it's perfectly fine. It's about defending your garden from weeds and planting flowers, and I think the theme is very cool. But as it is as a PnP sort of game, I can't really rank it any higher on the list. Number 41 is 22 Offerings, and this is a game that is amazingly easy to build because all you need is a standard pack of tarot cards. I enjoy the innovative mechanic of offering the minor arcana to the major arcana, and in general just having kind of these different mini challenges that you need to resolve. The biggest drawback of this game is that it requires extremely heavy referencing of various reference sheets and charts to see what it is that you need to achieve, and it can be very taxing on your memory when it comes to using its gifts variant. So 22 Offerings I think is fun, but a little bit cumbersome. Still worth your time if you would like to try playing a game with a deck of tarot cards. Coming in at number 40, we have Conquest Fall Blau, which is a World War II themed game where we play as the Germans invading Russia. I think the gameplay is quite solid, and I really like the video game style of unlocking different areas once you overcome various challenges. The theme just didn't really appeal to me too much, and I do acknowledge that this is partly because I live in Germany and war games are not really a thing that people play over here so often for fun. All in all, I do think this is a pretty good game. There's just 39 other games that I like more than it. My number 39 is Unsuspected, which is an adorable, teeny tiny little single player deduction game with very cute little chibi art characters and very funny little puns. I find this game pretty adorable and quite engaging. In addition, there are 2 expansions that you can use to add in extra fun and variability in your games, so I think that pocket-sized Unsuspected is definitely worth a look if you like deduction. Number 38 is Dolphins and Dinos. Now, this is a time-based puzzle game that some people might find rather stressful, myself included, but regardless, it is still a good amount of fun. You are playing a museum director and you're trying to lay out the exhibits to make the most interesting sort of path possible for your tour groups to go through. You have to do this under a strict time limit, and you have to try to keep the project as under budget as possible. I think the game has pretty good replayability and could even be really fun played with 2 players if you just have 2 sets of the game. I might have ranked this game a little bit higher if the artwork had been a bit more detailed and colorful, but as it is, the black and white kind of simple iconography is perfectly serviceable. Coming in at number 37 is Terror by the Lake, and this is a really fun little game where you play as the slasher in a cheesy 80s horror film, and you're attempting to murder all of the teenagers that are in a lonesome cabin out in the middle of nowhere. The game is playable in just a few minutes and is always entertaining in my experience. The only thing is that it is very heavily luck-based, and I feel like the player doesn't have a ton of control over their actions, but even so, this game is really worth a look, especially if you love horror and horror movie tropes. So my number 36 I would really have liked to place higher because I like its general idea, but I think it needs a little bit more work, a little bit more polish. Now this game is Light Years from Home. And this is a game that is kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure sort of story, but it's played in a small deck of cards instead of in a book. What I find really interesting and novel about this is that you have to make decisions, but you don't get to see the impact of your decisions until later on, and sometimes you won't even be entirely sure what decision caused what outcome. I think it's a really novel and immersive sort of idea for storytelling. The only problem is that with just the nature of this game, the deck of cards that you're going to have to use is always necessarily going to be very small because you're going to need to hold it in your hand, and since it's a narrative sort of game, it's not going to have a lot of replay value. Even so, I really enjoyed my time working on building my little space colony, and this game kept me hooked until I reached the end. My number 35 is cillas. Cillas is a very cute dice game where you play as an adorable little mouse mage who goes adventuring into an icy cavern to defeat the monsters and dispel the evil magic there. cillas is a game with a lot of potential, I believe. The system of the dice rondelle, the style of gameplay with the building up magical power and charging various cards to make attacks, and the whole deck building element I think is very good. But as it is, it feels a little bit unbalanced and a little bit too difficult. Number 34 is 0x. 0x is pretty much the opposite of a 4x game, hence the name 0x. So in this game, instead of attempting to explore, exterminate, and all of these other X's, you are trying to stop the other alien races from doing any of these things. So basically this is an alien space politics game where you're just trying to maintain the status quo long enough to maintain your power over the galaxy. 0x is a very thoughtful and strategic sort of game that I think you could use a lot of different strategies when playing. The main thing that holds it back is the complexity and the amount of time that it takes to learn this game. But if you have the patience, I think that 0x might be worth looking at. Coming in at number 33, we have Plug and Pray. Now, Plug and Pray is actually a game that I find really fun, and just the whole theme of being somebody working for an extremely corrupt technology business it's really fun. It's a game where you have to manage a server, but at the beginning of the game there is no server. You have to build it completely from the ground up with just some random parts that you have to throw together and try to make it as efficient as possible. I found the little customer tickets and the orders to be very interesting and fun to fulfill, and in general it's just a very different style sort of game that even has puzzle elements to it. I think the biggest drawback of Plug and Pray, however, is the amount of time that it takes to build this and the amount of specialized sort of items that you're going to need if you want to make a nice build. So in order to build Plug and Pray, you're going to need to make 12 custom dice that have stickers on all of the faces, and in my opinion, if you want to make the most of this game, you're going to need to have some transparent colored plastic chips or something to use as the markers that you place on top of the dice, so that you can read them basically without having to lift up your stack every time. My number 32 is Mars 2035, the dice game. Now, Mars 2035, the dice game is extremely large and very ambitious. Just looking at this game on the table, it's very impressive just how many components there are. There's a ton of different cards, there's a large, colorful board. There are 4 different characters that you can play as, and you can experiment with making different teams of astronauts. I think Mars 2035 is really a good game that could benefit from having a few more scenarios. As it is, the replay value isn't very good because I believe there are only 3 scenarios that you can do, but I think that with a bit more development, this game would easily be a bit higher up on my list. Number 31 is Weird the Descent. Now, Weird the Descent is a game that I actually really like, and it's just not higher on the list because I feel like there are parts missing from it right now. So Weird the Descent is a pretty simple game that you only need a couple of reference pages to play, and you draw out your dungeon on a sheet of grid paper. Basically, it's an extremely simple little dungeon crawler that you play with just paper and pencil. The object of the game is not to survive, because you know going into it that your character is going to die. The object is just to get the highest possible score, and I find this novel. The world that the game is set in is also interesting and different, and I would really like to know more about the lore. As it is, I do think that there are just a few too few rules and there's not quite enough player agency, but I'm really excited to see how this game develops in the future. Coming in at number 30, we have Back of House. Back of House is a really colorful, super adorable little dice game where you're managing a restaurant and you have to fulfill the orders quickly before the customers get angry. I just really liked it, and I thought the general overall mechanics are really cute and really fun. My biggest problem with the game is how quickly it becomes rather unbalanced feeling when your tidiness meter of your kitchen falls below a certain point, and then you have to roll for the expediter after every single order to see if it even goes out. In most cases it's going to fail, and then all of your hard work is just lost and there's really nothing you can do to mitigate that. But aside from this, I think the game is pretty solid. Number 29 is Konkan Trail. Now, Konkan Trail is a game where you play as an Indian general leading your troops through some dangerous terrain to reach the enemy fort, and along the way you have to defeat enemies in their camps and steal their plans. Now, Konkan Trail is a game that I liked from the beginning, but some of the modifications that have been made to it since the contest ended have really helped to boost this one's rank. As it is now, the artwork has been improved and it looks a lot sharper and a lot more colorful. The manual is more detailed and it gives you a little bit of background about what you're doing. The cards actually have backs now, and they didn't before, and now they look really colorful and very good. There's also a system of random events that add to extra fun and replayability. They also do add quite a lot of randomness to this game, which you may or may not like and you may or may not see as an improvement. But as for me, I like the event deck and I find the overall game to be a quite fun little puzzle. Number 28 is Wa Umins. Now, Wa Umins is probably the biggest surprise that I've gotten from the entire contest so far. When I first saw it, I was really not impressed by the art style, and the name of the game was just strange to me, but this game really grew on me. It's a tower defense sort of feeling sort of game where you're attempting to advance as far along a track as you can, fighting zombies along the way. This is a great little deck builder that's a bit rough around the edges. Wa Umins really, to me, feels like it's still in its infancy, but with a decent amount of work, I could see myself actually paying decent money to buy the deluxe version of this on Kickstarter. My number 27 is Save the Queen. Save the Queen is a neat little puzzle game that's based on Peg Solitaire, and basically what it is there are a bunch of little Peg Solitaire puzzles that you have to solve, collecting as much nectar along the way as possible, and you can spend this nectar on special moves. This game is really fun and playful. I really like the bee sort of theme and having to defend the queen of your hive. I like that you can choose from different difficulties for the different territories as the game goes on. You can really see how far you want to push your luck and maybe do some of the easier territories to build up the nectar to do the harder ones. In general, I think Save the Queen is a good amount of fun. The only two things that hold it back, in my opinion, are the art style, which I do not personally find that appealing, and also that if you're very good at Peg Solitaire, and if you solve the puzzles enough times, this game might not have a lot of replayability, because every puzzle is set up the same way every time. However, there is the random element of rolling for nectar every time you pick it up, so there is a little bit of difference here and there. But all in all, your strategy will probably be pretty similar from territory to territory. Coming in at number 26 is Multiverse Express. Multiverse Express is a really different sort of beast. This is a game with a ton of cards, like literally hundreds of cards, and a good amount of them are very, very small. It has elements of choose your own adventure, but to me it feels a little bit more like old school point and click because it involves picking up items, using them in different ways, and the logic isn't always the most logical. It involves a decent amount of guesswork. Multiverse Express could have easily been much higher up on my list, but as it is, the actual story that it has right now is nothing too special in my opinion. With a really good narrative and some really excellent puzzles, however, I could see the engine of this game really helping to propel this game near the top of my list. Alright, so I can see this video is getting a little bit long. Those are my rankings from number 56 to 26. Please tune in next week to see my rankings of number 25 to my number 1. Thank you for watching. If you would like to help support the channel, then please like, comment, and subscribe, and consider supporting me on Patreon. An extra special thanks to my heroic tier patron, Joshua Jumbles. You can also check out the Facebook group for all things solo gaming. So until next time, friends, happy adventuring.